Both for new and experienced project managers, having the ability to be able to move between different project methodologies is essential for overall success. Whilst there are a number of different project management frameworks, most of those frameworks are underpinned by two guiding methodologies, Waterfall and Agile. In this video, we're going to put the two side by side to fully understand the differences and similarities between the two. Specifically, we'll cover the following four key areas. We'll work to understand exactly what the Waterfall and Agile methodologies are and the pros and cons of each one. We'll then put those two methodologies side by side to compare some of their key differences and finish off by taking a look at when you would use the Waterfall or the Agile methodology depending on the project that you're running. So let's get started. We'll start off with a definition of the Waterfall methodology. The Waterfall methodology is a linear project management approach where stakeholder requirements are determined at the beginning of the project and then a sequential plan is put in place to design, build, test, and deliver a product or service that meets those requirements. There's a few key words on the screen here that I'd like to really draw your attention to. They are the words linear and sequential. The Waterfall methodology is fundamentally built on a step-by-step approach whereby we complete all of the work in one phase before moving on to the next one. Let's have a look at how this looks visually. On the screen, you'll see a fairly standard project lifecycle with traditional phases for the concept, the design, the build, the test, and then the delivery of a project. Where this life cycle is particularly significant for the topic we're discussing today is in the work that we do. In Waterfall, we typically do all of our work in that linear fashion before we progress on to the next thing. That means that we do all of our design before we move on to doing all of our build, all of our testing, and we deliver our whole product all at once. This methodology is perhaps the most well known across the different project management sectors, and it has its origins and its roots in manufacturing and industry, where it fits perfectly. That sort of methodology works very well for manufacturing, construction, infrastructure type projects. Let me give you an example. Imagine that you're building a house. You'll come up with a concept to build a house. You'll bring an architecture team in to design that house, and when they've completed their designs, they've done all of their designs, we'll then move on to build, and we'll do all of our build. We'll then test that house to make sure that it fully meets all of our government regulations or the standards that we need before we move on to delivery and we deliver that house to our customer. Crucially, our customer is expecting to receive a whole house. They're not expecting to receive part of a house. Therefore, we have to deliver them all of the work. It makes sense, right? So let's have a look at some of the pros and cons that we see in that sort of waterfall methodology, that waterfall delivery structure. So firstly, this linear approach gives us project managers structure. We know exactly how we're going to get from A to B. We define all the work that we want to do up front, and it gives us a clear roadmap and a clear plan to know exactly what we're going to deliver. Crucially, having that good structure and defining exactly what we're going to do up front. If we have a lot of complexity in our project, there's a lot of different moving parts, maybe it's technically complex, we have a really structured way to move us from A to B and help to sort of overcome and manage that complexity. But what doesn't the waterfall methodology give us? Well, firstly, it's quite rigid. We have to follow those certain steps, and we have to make sure that all the work is done before we move into the next phase. It's really structured, but sometimes that does bring some rigidity. What happens if we get halfway through the project and actually we decide that some of the things that we thought at the start were wrong and we need to make a change? That structure can actually make it really hard to make those changes. There are mechanisms in place that do allow us to do that, but it's quite rigid, and that structure is hard to make a change in a timely and effective manner. It'll be a lot of admin and a lot of work to do. And then lastly, a term that we use here called Big Bang delivery. From the start to the end of our project, we only get our delivery right at the end. Some projects can take months, years to deliver, so our customers waiting a long time before they get any delivery because we have to go through all of those stages and deliver all of that work. Keep in mind some of those drawbacks, and we'll now move on to take a little bit of a look at Agile. So we'll start again with the definition. The Agile methodology is a project management approach where constant stakeholder collaboration is used to iteratively design, build, test, and deliver the customer requirements. On this screen, I really want you to focus in on the word iteratively. In project management specifically, when we talk about delivering iteratively, we actually break up our project. We break up our project into chunks. That means that we can deliver little bits of our product or service and keep repeating that process so we deliver our project in pieces. Again, we'll move on to a visual just to show how this looks on screen. And hopefully this visual starts to bring this to life a little bit more. Rather than having those sort of step-by-step phases that we saw within the waterfall structure, here we have smaller pieces of work that deliver part of our overall product or service in that sort of iterative fashion. Agile methodologies are a bit newer. They've really been born and then sort of grown in popularity with the rise of computer software development. And here's an example, I suppose, of how they've been built and why they work. Let's imagine that we're building a piece of software, we're building a website. That website's got 10 pages, and each of those pages is completely unique. They've got their own setup, their own configuration. Rather than delivering our whole website together and taking a while to get to that point, we can actually design, build, test, and then deliver and put live each of our website pages in turn. I can get my homepage live so my customers can start seeing it, they can start using that, they can start getting some benefit from that website. And while they're doing that, I can then move on to start building our About Us page or our services page. I don't have to do everything at once. Crucially, software development as a sector, as an industry, enables us to be able to do that. But also, our customers don't necessarily expect to always go onto a website and see a whole website completed all in one time. So we can be iterative with our development to do little bits of our project as and when we need to. Again, then we'll look at some of the pros and cons of Agile. So breaking our work up into those little chunks gives us two really key benefits. It gives us greater flexibility. So as we're doing different bits, we've got the flexibility to change and tweak those things as we move forward. And it also enables that earlier delivery. We haven't got to wait until the end. We can do little bits of our delivery as we go through our project. As I'm sure you can imagine, a project where we do small little bits of work as a team and we keep moving forward is inherently sort of more collaborative. And we bring together our project team and our stakeholders, and we work together in a faster, more sort of agile process to really bring value to the customer as quickly as possible. But then flipping back to some drawbacks then, we spoke about how with our waterfall methodology, it really helps us manage complexity. Well, within Agile, we kind of lose that very structured, very rigid approach. So if we have some more sort of complex projects, they can sometimes be a bit harder to track and sort of keep a hold of. Because we're doing all of our work at once, we are designing, we're building, we're testing, and we're delivering in a very short window, it means that we have a really compact resource structure. We've got to get all of our different experts, all of our different project team members working at the same time, whereas in our waterfall process, it might have been stretched out. It might be more intense at different times in waterfall, but it was more stretched out and we can move our resources around. And again, where we spoke about Agile having a real benefit of being really collaboratively, working really collaboratively, is really dependent on communication. If we don't all get together as a team and work well, it really does fall down. And the situations such as we find ourselves now, I'm recording this in 2021, when we're not together, when we're not co-located, sometimes that communication and collaboration can be harder. And really, Agile is built on that absolute foundation. So I wanted to sort of bring this to a close and start to move into a sort of summary by putting these frameworks side by side. I suppose this helps to paint the picture of how they're fundamentally different in how they break down and really how we get our project from A to B. In a comparison such as this, it's clear to visualize how time to delivery can be so much quicker in Agile if we imagine that our sort of timeline goes from from left to right on the screen, we get a delivery much earlier on. It's a smaller delivery, it's not our whole product, but we get that earlier delivery and we can start to get our customers some value of our product or service a lot sooner. What you can't really see in a graphical representation like this is the complexity or any regulations around the project. Again, if these were quite high, Agile may not be the best framework, and you might look to go with more of a waterfall style methodology. Again, ultimately, you'll get to the same position, you'll deliver your project, but it's about picking the right one, depending on the type of project and your customer expectations at the time. So to recap, there's sort of three key differences that separate Waterfall and Agile. Whereas Waterfall follows that very linear, sequential, step-by-step framework, where each of those steps has to be completed before we move on to the next one. Agile follows that more iterative approach. We break our project work up into chunks. We deliver our overall project as small sort of bite-sized packages. In Waterfall, because of that sort of step-by-step process, all of our project scope is defined at the start. This is great for sort of managing that complexity, but it can mean that the project loses some of that flexibility. And if you do need to change anything, whilst it's not impossible to do, it's usually a lot more admin and usually a little bit more work. Whereas in Agile, because we break our work up into iterative chunks and we design, we build, we test, and we deliver as we go, you have a bit more flexibility and a bit more open to be able to change as you move on to tackling each of those different work chunks. And lastly, in the structure of how we deliver that, we've spoke about it before, but that design, test, deliver, our design, build, test, and deliver phases. In Waterfall, they're very sequential, whereas in Agile, they follow these iterative cycles where we can again start delivering value to our customers quicker and just move around chunking those pieces of work up and delivering them as we go. And that's it for a quick look at the differences between Waterfall and Agile methodologies. In this video, we've predominantly focused on framework and sort of how we deliver Waterfall and Agile projects and sort of the structure of, as project managers, how we would move that work from A to B. But if you really want to understand in a bit more detail, some of the more fundamental and some of the more holistic differences between Waterfall and Agile, I'd definitely point you towards having a look at some of the Waterfall and Agile philosophies, some of the working principles, and some of the team roles as well that will show you exactly how those two methodologies differ in sort of day-to-day application.